Good day everyone, we are Group 6 and we will discussing about disaster risk reduction and management. And today I'll be discussing the first topic, which is hazard. Hazard in tourism are potential threats to the safety and well-being of tourists, local communities, and the environment. They can disrupt travel plans, cause physical harms, damage a destination's reputation, and create significant economic losses. They can be categorized into natural, human-made, environmental, health, and economic hazards. What are the hazards in tourism? Hazards in tourism are anything that can potentially harm tourists, local people, or the environment when people travel and visit places. These hazards can mess up travel plans, cause injuries, hurt a place's image, and cause a lot of money. So we have a different kinds of hazards. The first one is natural hazards or natural disasters. Events like earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, hurricanes, floods, and wildfires can cause widespread destruction and threaten tourist safety. Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of these hazards, especially in coastal areas. So imagine we are all planning our dream vacations, beaches, mountain, exploring new cities, but we also need to think about something kind of serious, the natural disasters. Think about it. Earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes, hurricanes, flood, wildfires. These things can be super scary and cause a lot of damage, not just to places where the people to live, but also to places tourists visits. Imagine you're planning a trip especially the Philippines, and then a volcano erupts. Suddenly, your flights are cancelled. The air is filled with ash, and the beautiful landscapes are covered in lava. Not exactly the relaxing vacation you were hoping, right? And it's not just a volcanoes. Think about coastal areas. What happens when a huge hurricane hits? Hotels get destroyed, beaches disappears, and everything is a mess. Or what about floods? They can ruin cities and make it possible to get around, especially to what's happening in Philippines right now in Cebu. We have a devastating typhoon right now for having such a huge floods that happening in Cebu. So this kind is natural hazards. The scary thing is climate change is making all of this worse. Sea levels are rising, which means more flooding. We're getting more extreme weather like stronger hurricanes and longer droughts, which lead to more wildfires. So what this mean for us as travelers? Well, we need to be aware of the risks. Check the weather and local news before you go anywhere. Think about travel insurance that covers natural disasters, and maybe have a backup plan just in case something goes wrong. And it's not about being scared, but about being smart and responsible travelers. We want to enjoy our vacations, but we also want to be safe and respect the place we visit. So that is the kind of natural hazards. Let's move on to our second hazards, which is human-made. These risks are caused by or exacerbated by human activity, including both deliberate and accidental actions. We have a safety and security threats. So, safety and security threats have a crime. Like a petty theft like pickpocketing is common in tourist hotspots, but more severe incidents like hotel shooting and kidnapping can also occur. So, we've talked about natural disaster earlier, right? But there's another side to the story. So, human-made hazards. These risks that are caused or made worse by what people do. First up is think about safety and security. Crime is a big one. In tourist hotspot, you've got to watch out for pickpockets and scams. But sometimes things can get really serious, like shooting or kidnappings. That kind of stuff can scare tourists, and the way reality hurt the reputation of a place. Then there's our technological infrastructure failures, the transportation accidents, Accidents involving planes, buses, or boats can cause harm to tourists. The next is infrastructure collapse. Poorly constructed buildings or structure can fail, posing a risk to visitor and staff. And so, then there are technological and infrastructure failures. Imagine a bridge is collapsing or a building falling down because it wasn't built right. Or think about a plane or bus crash. These kinds of accidents can be really devastating and can definitely make people think twice about traveling somewhere. And we have also economic hazards. Financial crisis is recessions or periods of high inflation can reduce tourist spending and decrease travel demand. And next is economic leakage. A significant portion of tourism profits may go to foreign companies rather than benefiting the local economy. There are economic hazards if a country is having a financial crisis, like a recession. People just don't have as much money to spend on vacation, and then there's something called economic leakage. This is when the money tourists spend doesn't really benefit the local people. Like if you stay in a big foreign-owned hotel, a lot of that money goes back to the company overseas instead of helping the local economy. So just like with natural disaster, it's important to be aware of these human-made risks when you're planning a trip. Do your research, be careful, and try to support local businesses so your money actually helps the community you're visiting. The third hazard is environmental. Tourism's own activities can damage the very environments that attract visitors. The first is pollution. So for pollution, we have a waste and littering. Popular destination often struggles with waste disposal, leading to pollution of oceans, landscapes, and rivers. Next is sewage. Inadequate sewage treatment can contaminate water surrounding tourist attractions, harming marine life like coral reefs and posing health risks. We were talking about how tourism can be affected by natural disasters and human-made problems earlier, but it is also important to realize that tourism itself can cause problems too. When tons of people visit a place, they create a lot of waste. All that trash and litter can pollute the environment and especially oceans and rivers. And if there aren't good sewage system, the water can get contaminated, which is bad for marine life and can even make people sick. Then there's an issue like air resource depletion or for having a water scarcity. Like hotels and resorts, especially those with golf courses and swimming pools, can put immense strain on local freshwater resources. And next is land degradation. Construction for tourism infrastructure can lead to soil erosion and the destruction of natural habitats like coastal wetlands and forests. Hotels and resorts use a crazy amount of water, especially if they have golf courses and swimming pools. This can put a strain on local water supplies, especially in places that are already dry. And building all those hotels and roads can destroy natural habitats like forests and wetlands. And what about over-tourism? Over-tourism for our environmental, like strain on local communities, excessive tourist crowds can increase living costs, displace residents, and degrade infrastructure. And next is for having a damage to fragile ecosystem. Mass tourism can trample vegetation and disturb wildlife, particularly in ecologically insensitive area. When too many people visit a place, it can drive up the cost of living for locals, making it harder for them to afford things. Plus, all those tourists can trample vegetation and disturb wildlife, especially in sensitive area. So, tourism can be a double-edged sword. It can bring money and jobs to a place, but it can also cause environmental and social problems if it's not managed carefully. That's why it is important to be a responsible traveler and think about the impact you're having on the places you visit. So we've talked about natural disasters, human-made hazards, and how tourism can harm the environment. But we also need to think about health-related hazards. So we have infectious diseases. contaminated food or water can lead to gastrointestinal infections like traveler's diarrhea, mosquito-borne illnesses such as malaria, dengue fever, and these are common risks in many regions. Next is we have pandemics and epidemics. Large-scale health crises like the COVID-19 pandemic can have devastating global consequences for the tourism industry, leading to massive travel restrictions and closure. There are infectious diseases. One of the most common is traveler's diarrhea, which you can get from contaminated food or water. And in many parts of the world, you have to worry about mosquito-borne illnesses like malaria, dengue, fever, and those of the viruses. Of course, pandemics and pandemic, we also saw what happened with COVID-19. It had a devastating impact on the tourism industry with massive travel restrictions and closure. So next is food poisoning. Food poisoning is poor food and beverage handling can lead to outbreaks of foodborne illnesses among tourists. Then of course, food poisoning is another risk. If food and beverages aren't handled properly, it can lead to outbreaks of foodborne illnesses among tourists. Next is accidents and injuries. Workplace accidents like slips, trips, and falls can occur in hospitality setting. About accidents and injuries, it can happen in hotel, restaurants, and another hospitality setting. And next is mental stress. Demanding work environments and long hours can lead to psychological stress for tourism and industry employees. And so, it is important to remember that working in the tourism industry can be really stressful. Demanding work environments and long hours can lead to psychological stress for employees. So when you're planning to a trip, it's important to think about these health-related hazards and take steps to protect yourself. This might mean getting vaccinated, being careful about what you eat and drink, and taking precautions to avoid mosquito bites. And if you're working in the tourism industry, it's important to take care of your mental health and find ways to manage stress. Okay, so we've been talking about different hazards that affect tourism, and now we're gonna chat about economic and technological ones. Economic overdependence, heavy reliance on tourism make a destination vulnerable to economic shocks caused by travel downturns. The pandemic, for instance, put millions of tourism jobs at risk. So, economic overdependence is basically if a place relies way too much on tourism, it's in trouble if something happens to travel industry. Think about what happened during the pandemic. Millions of tourism jobs were at risk because people just weren't traveling. And economic leakage is a significant portion of tourism revenue can leave the host country and go to foreign-owned businesses, limiting the financial benefits for the local community. Then, there's economic leakage when a lot of the money that tourists spend doesn't actually stay in the local community. Instead, it goes to foreign-owned businesses like big hotel chains, so the local economy doesn't benefit as much as it could. And next is inadequate infrastructure. Poorly developed or unreliable transportation, communication system, and utilities can result in technical failures that disrupt tourist services. We have inadequate infrastructure if a place has poorly developed transportation and such. It can cause all sorts of problems for tourists. Imagine trying to get around without reliable transportation or dealing with constant power outage. So, the bottom line is that it is important for destinations to diversify their economies, support local businesses, and invest in reliable infrastructure. The way they will be more resilient to economic and technology.
Risk assessment is an important process that helps identify possible hazards and analyze how likely they are to happen and how much harm they could cause. It allows organizations to prepare and take action before problems occur. So, vulnerability analysis is a part of risk assessment that focuses on finding weaknesses, whether in people, system, or process that could be taken advantage of by threats. So in short, risk assessment looks at the overall danger and its impact, while vulnerability analysis looks at closely at what makes the system or organization exposed to those risks. Halimbawa, sa isang hotel, ginagawa ang risk assessment para malaman kung ano ang mga panganib ang pwedeng mangyari tulad ng sunog, data breach, or aksidente ng guest. Sinusuri nila kung gaano kalaki ang epekto ng bawat panganib at gaano kadalas sa pwedeng mangyari. Habang sa vulnerability analysis naman, tinitingnan kung saan may kahinaan ang hotel. Halimbawa, kung mahina ang password ng computer system, kulang sa fire extinguisher sa ilang floor, o hindi sapat ang training ng staff sa emergency situations. So, ibig sabihin, ang risk assessment ay tumutukoy sa mga posibleng banta at epekto nito, habang ang vulnerability analysis ay tumutukoy kung saan bahagi ng sistema tayo madaling maapektuhan ng mga banta. So, ang risk assessment ay proseso ng pagsusuri ng mga posibleng banta o panganib na pwedeng makaapekto sa operasyon ng isang negosyo o organisasyon. Layunin nitong malaman kung ano ang mga posibleng mangyari, gaano kalaki ang epekto nito, at kung paano ito maiiwasan o mababawasan. Halimbawa, sa isang restaurant, pwedeng mag-conduct ng risk assessment para malaman ang mga panganib tulad ng mga sunog sa kitchen, food contamination, or power outage. Tinitingnan nila kung gaano kalaki ang tansyang mangyari ang mga ito at kung anong epekto sa negosyo. Bilang strategy, pwede maglagay ng fire extinguisher, magbigay ng food safety training sa mga staff, at maghanda ng backup generator. Sa ganitong paraan, natutulungan ng risk assessment ang isang negosyo na maging handa at maiwasan ang mga problemang pwedeng maapekto sa kanilang operasyon. So, vulnerability analysis is the process of identifying, analyzing, and prioritizing weaknesses in system, networks, processes that could be exploited by threats. Its main goal is to find the weak points before attackers or problems can take advantage of them. By understanding these vulnerabilities, organizations can take action to fix or strengthen them, reducing the chances of damage or system failure. So, halimbawa ng vulnerability, kunyari, in a restaurant management, may find the staff use password like 12345 to access the POS system. This is the major vulnerability because anyone could log in and change orders or prices. The solution would be to implement stronger password policies and train employees on cybersecurity practices. Through vulnerability analysis, businesses can identify weaknesses early and take preventive steps to protect their operations, customers, and reputation. So how they work together? Once these weaknesses are identified, risk assessment uses that information to evaluate how likely those threats are to happen and how big their impact could be. This helps organizations decide which risk needs to be addressed first and what strategies to use to prevent or reduce harm. So, vulnerability analysis shows where the organization is weak, and risk assessment determine how dangerous those weaknesses are. So, together, they build a stronger and safer environment by helping prevent problems before they happen. The picture explains how risk assessment and vulnerability analysis works together in understanding and managing risk. It shows that risk happens when three factors come together: hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. A hazard is something dangerous that could cause harm, such as natural disaster, fire, and cyber attack. Exposure means being in a situation where people, structures, or systems are in contact with that hazard. For example, a business located in a flood-prone area. Vulnerability refers to how weak or unprepared someone or something is when faced with the hazards such as lack of safety, training, or poor infrastructure. The formula shown in the image, risk equals hazard times exposure and a vulnerability, means that the higher these three factors are, the greater the risk become. The pictures also illustrate risk management, which focuses on preventing or minimizing the damage that a hazard can cause. In simple terms, the image teaches us that to reduce risk, we can either avoid hazard, lessen exposure, or strengthen our defenses by reducing vulnerability. This helps organizations and communities become safer and more resilient against threats.
So the next topic is disaster risk reductions and disaster risk management, or DRM. So DRR and DRM are comprehensive continuous processes that aims to prevent and lessen the effects of, prepare for, and recover from the impact of natural or human-made hazards. And the core idea is that it focuses on moving from reactions matapos ang isang disaster through by being proactive at sa paglesen ng mga hazard or disaster before it happens. So the disaster is the outcome of a hazard interacting with a community's exposures and vulnerability. So sa example is nabanggit yung flood daw is a natural hazard, but it becomes a disaster when vulnerable community expose it. So nabanggit yung hazard, which is something dangerous like flood. And ang exposure naman, which is the people or places that are in the path of the hazard. And the vulnerability naman is how weak or unprepared those people or places that may affect the hazards. So the differences between disaster risk reductions and disaster risk management is ang DRR is ang goal nila is to prevent preventing new and reducing the existing disaster risk, while ang DRM is they implement to the goal through concrete actions encompassing the entire cycle from preventions and mitigations to response and recover. So here's the framework of the DRRM. The main international framework for disaster risk reductions, or DRR, is the Sendai Frameworks 2015 to 2030, which provides clear priorities for actions. So the Sendai Framework is a global plan to help countries, and that's agreement adopted by the United Nations. So the Sendai Framework help our countries to prevent and reduce disaster risk like typhoon, earthquakes, floods, and also the pandemics. Kaya mas kaunting buhay ang nawawala at mas mabilis na makabangon ng isang community because of the Sendai Frameworks. Kasi nga, tinutulungan nila tayong ma-reduce yun. So the Sendai Frameworks have a 4 priorities for actions to prevent no disaster or risk that might help us. So first is understanding disaster risk. So understanding disaster risk is knowing what kinds of disaster can happen, where and how bad that could be that might affect people. For example is in the Philippines, knowing which areas ang madaling bahain ay nakakatulong sa mga tao na maiwasan ang pagtatayo ng mga bahay sa lugar na yon, kasi nga alam na nila na prone sa baha yung lugar na yon, so hindi na sila magtatayo doon ng bahay. So the second priorities for action is strengthening disaster risk governance. So the government leader must work together to make clear plans and involve communities para mas mapaghandaan pa yung mga possible disaster na maaaring mangyari sa ating community. For example is the local barangays. They organizing evacuation drills and having a clear emergency contact so that the rescue is easy to respond in terms of helping those in need. So the third priorities for action is investing in disaster risk reductions for resilience. So these priorities from Sendai frameworks encourage governments, businesses, and communities to put money into safety measures before disaster happens, and also spend money wisely and invest a stronger infrastructure like buildings, schools, hospitals, and homes na kayang o hindi madaling masira kapag may baha or earthquake or anumang bagyo. And mag-invest rin sa early warning system like installation sirens and weather monitoring tools, and in training education and environmental protections like planting mangroves to reduce storm surge. So for example is, after Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, many communities rebuilt homes using stronger materials and elevated design, and so that the government also invested in multi-purpose evacuation centers and early warning system. So these changes help reduce casualties and damage in the later storms. The last priorities for action is enhancing disaster preparedness and build back better. So this means that we should be ready before disasters strike, and after they happen, rebuild it stronger and more safer way. And what does building back better means? So after of rebuilding things the same way before, instead we build stronger and smarter to avoid future damage again. For example is, after Typhoon Yolanda again, many homes were rebuilt with stronger materials and better design to withstand future storms. So dahil nga alam na nila na kailangan nilang ulit i-build yung kanilang mga homes na at gumamit ng mas matitibay na mga materials. Kasi alam nila yung mga nangyari noon. So, kailangan na mas matitibay na yung materials na gagamitin. So, are the 4 priorities for action according to Sendai framework. And these frameworks remind us that disaster don't have to be devastating. If we truly understand the risk, we should learn how to prepare wisely and rebuild with resilience. So this is not just about reacting, it's about planning ahead, because disaster can destroy lives, homes, and even the economies and our tourism. So we need to follow the Sendai frameworks and their priorities for action for our safety and for the safety of our communities and our tourism. So the disaster risk reduction and management have 4 pillars. So the first is prevention and mitigation. These are long-term activities and measures to reduce the severity of impact of hazard. So prevention and mitigation, this means taking action before disaster happens to reduce their impact or avoid them completely. So preventions means stopping the disaster from happening or getting worse. It's about avoiding risk before they become problems. For example is, if a community lives near a river that floods often, relocating them to a safer place is a prevention. Next is mitigation, means reducing the damage a disaster can cause. It doesn't stop the disaster, but it makes it less harmful. For example, building stronger houses that can survive typhoons, or putting up flood barriers to protect homes. So that's preventions and mitigations. So the second 4 pillar is the preparedness. So preparedness means being ready before a disaster happens and learning what to do during a disaster and planning ahead so we don't panic, and also practicing how to respond quickly and safely. For example is when we do a earthquake drills at school, that's what we call preparedness, and those activities like early warning systems, emergency response plans, evacuation routes, and emergency supplies, those are the things that help us to prepare. So the third one is response. This is the immediate action to an emergency or disaster. The goal is to provide short-term relief to curb further loss of life and property. So response means what we do immediately after a disaster happens, and the goal is to save lives, protect people, and reduce damages. It's like helping someone right after an accident. For example, is in rescue operations, a firefighter or saving people trapped in a burning building. So yung yung mga bombero is nakapag-response agad para maapula yung mga apoy dun sa nasusunog na building. So rehabilitation and recovery is like a fixing your house after a storm. You clean, you repair, and make it stronger so it won't break again. For example is fixing road and bridges so that people can travel safely again. So that's the four pillars that can help our communities to be prepared and also our tourist destination when a disaster might go with us. So why DRRM is essential? So DRRM is essential in tourism because it helps keep tourists safe, protect businesses, and ensure that tourism can continue even after disaster. Without DRRM, a single disaster could shut down a destinations and harm the local economy. And we all know that tourism is all about travel, adventure, and relaxation, but it also involves risk. So natural disaster like typhoons, earthquake, and flood, or even the pandemic can affect tourist spot. That's why planning for safety is just as important as planning for fun. So DRRM is essential in tourism industry. So DRRM is crucial for several reasons. First is it saves lives and livelihood. It protects the most vulnerable people who are properly affected by disaster. So DRRM helps to protect people, especially those who are most at risk, like children, the elderly, and the poor family. For example, in flood-prone areas, building evacuation center and warning system helps people escape safely. And in terms of livelihood naman, farmers can protect crops by learning how to prepare for typhoons. So in economic benefits, so to simplify it, it's cheaper to prepare than to fix everything after a disaster. For example, building stronger school and hospital costs less than rebuilding them after an earthquake. So mas mapapamurang tayo sa pag-build ng mga mas matitibay na mga buildings kaysa ulitin ulit ito after than typhoons. So in support sustainable development, this means that improving lives today without harming the future, but when disaster like typhoons, flood, or earthquake hit, they can destroy school, hospital, roads, and also farm, and all the things we work hard to build. So for example, in Leyte after Typhoon Yolanda, many development projects were destroyed, but areas with DRRM plans like elevated buildings and early warning had less damage and recovered faster. So increase community resilience. Resilience means the ability to recover and adapt after a disaster. So DRRM teaches people how to prepare, response, and rebuild better. For example, in Marikina City, known for its flood preparedness, the city has early warning system, evacuations plan, and community drills. Even after heavy rains, they recover quickly and keep service running. And that's conclude for disaster risk reduction and management.
Good day everyone. Today I will be discussing about the resilience and vulnerability. So resilience refers to a system's ability, whether an individual, community, or entire economy, to endure, adjust to, and bounce back from disturbances. When vulnerability, on the other hand, is the degree to which a system can be harmed when exposed to such events. So these concepts are closely linked. The stronger a system resilience, the lower its vulnerability, and vice versa. So example of this is disaster and urban planning. So a coastal city with poorly built homes and many low-income residents in flood-prone areas is highly vulnerable to hurricanes. However, when the city implements stronger building standards, builds flood control structures, and develops efficient communication and evacuation plans, it becomes more resilient and able faster recovery from storms. So, in the tourism sector, vulnerability reflects the industry's sensitivity to threats like natural hazards, pandemics, and economic instability. Meanwhile, tourism resilience is the ability of destinations to plan, adjust, and rebuild after the disturbances. Increasing resilience helps reduce these underlying vulnerabilities. So the key factors increasing vulnerability tourism destinations may be more at risk due to, first is the environmental vulnerability. Environmental vulnerability, natural attractions such as beaches, coral reefs, and mountains are highly exposed to environmental threats, making destinations sensitive to ecological changes. Second one is the economic vulnerability. Areas dependent on limited tourism products, specific source markets, or particular seasons are more easily affected by disruptions. And the third one is the social vulnerability. So when a community's ability to handle and recover from crisis can be limited by factors like extreme seasonality, which often results in unstable employment and weak social support system. So there are also key factors strengthening resilience. To reinforce resilience in tourism destinations can focus on, the first one is the diversification. It broadening tourism activities, tapping into varied markets, and promoting year-round tourism helps reduce reliance on a single product or season, lessening economic risk. Second is the stakeholder cooperation. It builds strong coordination among governments, tourism businesses, and local communities, enhances preparedness, and ensures efficient response and recovery during crisis. So the COVID-19 pandemic became a significant real-world example of how the tourism industry can be both vulnerable and resilient. When we say vulnerability exposed, the crisis revealed that tourism heavily relies on tourist mobility and non-essential spending. Due to lockdowns and travel restrictions, tourism activities stopped, leading to a drastic decline in international arrivals and financial losses. And resilience displayed. Despite the challenges, tourism destinations and businesses adapted by creating new strategies for survival and recovery. So governments also supported the industry by offering financial aid and establishing health and safety protocols to rebuild traveler confidence. Thank you, and that concludes my report.
Hazard Impact Mitigation Measure. Hazard Impact Mitigation Measure is to mitigate hazard impacts in tourism sector. A comprehensive strategy is needed that addresses environmental, socio-cultural, and economic aspects. Measures should be implemented across four phases: the reduction, the readiness, the response, and recovery. Number one is reduction and prevention. This measure focuses on minimizing vulnerabilities and avoiding hazards before they occur. So environmental, implement sustainable practices, use sustainable building designs, prioritize renewable energy, and minimize single-use plastic to reduce the industry's environmental footprints. Number two is other example is sociocultural, respect local cultures, empower host communities, and in economic is diversity tourism offerings, support local businesses, and number two is readiness and preparedness. This action ensures the tourism sector is ready to respond effectively when a hazard strikes. The example is create communication plans is also to establish clear and honest communication plans for all stakeholders, tourists, staff, suppliers, and the government for use during and after a crisis, and develop early warning system. They implement system for monitoring weather and other hazards and create clear standard operating procedures for interpreting and acting on warnings. Number three is Response. Immediate action taken during and immediately after hazard event save lives and minimize damage. And the examples are to ensure safety of visitor and staff, coordinate with authorities, and number 4 is recovery. Long-term strategies to restore business operation and repair damage and build resilience for the future. Focus on innovation and rebuilding better. They do not simply revert to business as usual. Use the recovery phase to innovate, regain market share, and build more resilient businesses. And secure financing. Use disaster risk financing, insurance, and other instruments to facilitate recovery and fund resilience building projects.
Hazard negative impact tourism by causing immediate declines in visitors, damaging infrastructure, and harming a destination reputation and image. They can also lead a long-term effect like reduced visitor spending, job losses, and high-risk perceptions among potential tourists. Some hazard can have a short-term positive effects, such as creating a new landscape of ecotourism, or in some cases, temporary increase in visitors after an initial decline. Hazards such as typhoons, earthquakes, and volcanic eruption greatly affects of tourism. They cause a sudden decline in visitors because the tourists fear to their safety. Infrastructure like hotels, airports often gets damaged, disrupting travels and local business. These events can also harm the destination reputation and reduce income and job opportunities for local workers. Negative impact. Decline in visitor number. Hazard like tsunamis, volcanic eruption, and severe storm can cause a sudden drop in tourism arrivals due to safety concern and damage to the destination. Infrastructure damage. Airports, ports, and roads and accommodation can be damaged or destroyed, making it possible to operate tourism service. When disaster occur, tourist arrivals drop sharply as a people cancel trips due to safety concern. Airports, road, even accommodation may be destroyed, making travels impossible. This disruption cause business closure and lose income for tourism workers. Reputation damage. A destination image can be severely tarnished after a disaster, deterring future visitors and impacting long-term economic stability. Economic damage to infrastructure and a drop in visitor number lead to job and losses and reduced income, particularly for those in low-skilled tourism jobs. Environmental damage. Hazards can damage natural attractions like coral reefs, forests, and beaches, reducing like destination attractiveness. Hazard damage a destination image, making a tourist hesitant to visit again. With fewer visitors, businesses lose profit and many workers lose their jobs. Tourists also feel unsafe or traumatized after disaster, avoiding the place in the future. Additional environmental damage like the destruction of coral reefs, forests, or beaches reduce the natural beauty that attraction visitors. Potential positive or mixed impact. Disaster tourism. Some hazard like volcanic eruption can attract tourists interested in unique geological phenomenon. Thus, these effects can be short-lived and raise ethical concerns. Post-disaster recovery opportunities. The need for reconstruction can lead to new opportunities for tourism businesses and deployment. Increased visitors short term. Some studies suggest a temporary spike in tourism arrivals after certain events, which may be a rebound effect driven by curiosity. Not all effects of hazard are negative. Some tourists are interested in disaster tourism, visiting areas affected by natural events like volcanic eruption. Reconstruction after disaster can also create new jobs and opportunities for local communities. In some cases, tourism arrivals increase temporarily out of curiosity, helping revive the local economy and tourist industry.